Hello. I just finished reading a new novel with my online book club, which is so good. I'm sure it's going to win a number of book awards and be read for many years to come. At least I hope so. I think it is a masterpiece. It is My Friends by Hisham Matar. It's the story of a man named Khalid who grew up in Libya and he moves to the UK to attend university. And here, he and his friend Mustafa attend a London protest about Gaddafi's government, and things turn terrifyingly violent. This radically upends his life and cuts him off from his homeland. I know some people are hesitant to read fiction which engages with politics so much, but this story is also intensely personal. I found it incredibly moving, but it also keyed me into so many startling historical incidents that I knew very little about. There were a number of specific scenes referencing things, and I thought surely this couldn't have actually happened. But then I went and looked it up, and yes, that did actually happen. It involves assassinations, tense political standoffs, and revolutions. And even though this affects the narrator in a very personal way, he's usually distanced from it and reflecting upon it. And this gives the novel a real melancholic feel and meditative quality. It's also filled with so many heartfelt insights and brilliantly composed sentences. You know, the type that gives such a unique perspective and contains so many ideas. You just have to sit and mull over them. It's a story about exile, trauma, and friendship. It's about finding a home in literature. And by the way, this novel is peppered with so many great book recommendations, and I love it when fiction tips you off to other books that you should be reading. Especially it highlights the great, very conflicted and melancholic writer, Jean Rhys. But it also shows how Khalid creates his own sense of home and family with a precious group of people that he connects with very deeply. It's about a specific conflicts in history, the oppression and terror of living under the specter of a military dictatorship, and how this can warp the relationships between people and destroy any sense of hope. This also speaks to the universal struggle of anyone trying to live their lives amongst unreasonable men, and this book often uses this phrase, unreasonable men. And it's also about the persistence of love amongst Khalid's biological family, even though they've been physically separated for many years, and communication between them becomes very difficult and necessarily coded. And it's so beautiful how it captures this relationship. It's also the story of a city and how London becomes Khalid's unintended home for decades. The present-day action of this story only takes place over a couple of hours in 2016 as Khalid is walking through the city. And in this way, I think this book enters into this tradition of London literature, such as Oliver Twist and Virginia Woolf's Mrs. Dalloway and Sam Selvin's The Lonely Londoners and Monica Ali's Brick Lane and Caleb Azuma Nelson's Open Water. These stories contain roots which can be physically traced on a map or in person, and since I'm lucky enough to live in London, I found it really brought this novel alive to travel to some of the locations that are mentioned in this story. And I want to read some of these London passages aloud to give you a flavor for the prose, but also how it evokes the sense of the city in the story. So I'm going to do that while showing you some of the footage that I filmed while I was out walking about. And this is the place where this novel begins, the mezzanine in King's Cross Station, where Khalid meets his friend Hisham, probably for the last time as Hisham is moving to America. And we follow Khalid's lonely journey as he walks back to his flat in Shepherd's Bush, as he recalls his past, his friends, and how he got to this point in his life. We arrived at St. Pancras station with time to spare. I suggested we go to sit in the cafe on the mezzanine of King's Cross station instead. Less frantic, I told him. The real reason was that I wanted to be surrounded by commuters, people heading out for the weekend or returning home, as they seemed more settled and their joys more modest. On my regular visits to the British Library next door, I would come here before heading home to this same cafe to let my eyes rest a while on the undramatic spectacle which made it all the more startling when someone ran to embrace another person or wiped away tears as they headed to their train. And here I am, still at King's Cross, watching him walk across the busy concourse with that air of indifference, as though if he were to collide with another individual, he might simply pass straight through them. Go after him, I tell myself. I weave through the crowd and I'm surprised by how quickly I manage to cross the distance. There he is, his innocent back so close that if I were to reach out, I could lay my hand on his shoulder. I let the gap grow a little, following him out of the station. He stops, waits for the lights so as to cross the road to St. Pancras. If he turns around now, how would I explain myself? But when did I ever feel the need to explain myself to him? The lights change and I follow him into St. Pancras. When he reaches the check-in desk, I hover at a good distance. He goes through the barrier and just before he disappears around the corner, he looks back. He does not appear to see me, continues on his way, or perhaps he did see me and the blankness in his eyes is the blankness we all carry deep within us towards those we love. I go to stand by the live departure boards. His train might be delayed or even cancelled. After several announcements calling passengers to board, the good minute goes. I picture him stepping onto the train, the doors closing behind him, and the heavy carriages rolling out. I leave St. Pancras and set off westwards on the Euston Road. It is 6 in the evening on the 18th of November, 2016, and the late autumn sun has already set. The twilight is glazing the sky a deep blue. The streets are brighter and more animated, making it seem as if light does not come from the heavens, but rises upwards in earthly rays, now fading pink into the clouds. It is Friday. The pavement is full of pedestrians, their heads forming a dark and shifting river. Traffic is thick and filling the air with a sad, metallic odor. The easy scent of fallen leaves is still perceptible in the background. I decide to walk. Maybe the 5 or 6 mile journey home will tire me enough to sleep. I continue down the Euston Road as though I have just arrived and my 32 years lived here could be collected in the palm of a hand. There is still time. I could return and spend the rest of my days beneath the same sky under which I was born. Maybe I would then forget everything that had happened, or not think so much about it. Or maybe I would turn into one of those returnees I recall from childhood, men who had lived other lives elsewhere and who persist, even years after their return, to give in to reminiscing, recounting, when the mood takes them, half-recollected stories and anecdotes to amuse their audience, who, in turn, are sometimes entertained and at other times obliged to tolerate their long stories with the wary patience of those who know they must not abruptly wake a sleepwalker. I continue down the Euston Road and reach the 4 caryatids, strong women carrying on their heads the roof of the porch that leads into the crypt of the St. Pancras New Church, maidens from the ancient Greek town of Caryae, followers of Artemis, each with a kink in her hip. In one hand they are clutching an extinguished torch, in the other an empty jug. They are guardians of the dead. I stand beneath them, their large eyes as smooth as eggshells, stare down blankly at me. I must keep moving. To live is to act. This is the location that this novel keeps circling back to, of St. James Square in London, and this is the building which used to be the Libyan embassy and which the protest occurs outside of. I have not, in all the years since the shooting, returned to St. James's Square. You can live a lifetime in a city avoiding places. I've attended none of the annual commemorations. On the odd occasion that I am in a cab and there is a possibility that the driver might choose to cut through here, I ask them to avoid it. But tonight, 32 years later, and as Hossam's train is now probably in the tunnel beneath the sea, I find myself here willingly. Here are the same trees, taller still, and here is the spot where I stood, the place where I was cut down. The night has grown all around me. I am finally leaving St. James's Square. Neither bless nor curse. Let all your elsewheres go. London is where you are. There's also a great memory where Khalid's friend Hossam takes him to a number of London locations where writers lived and worked. And in this way, the story shows how the cityscape is overlaid with both the fiction and the real lives of these authors. Pilgrimages have never interested me, but it was impossible not to be fascinated by the practical fact that Woolf had once lived here, walked into the world out of this exact door, and retreated away behind it. It made her books even more miraculous that they managed to exist in a world of so much variance, where with one wrong step everything can change. I began to find it fortifying, too, to trace the paths of these long-dead women and men whom I felt intimate with in ways I rarely do with living persons. There's also a striking section where Khalid goes to meet Hossam's ex-girlfriend Claire at the National Gallery, and they stand before a specific painting and meditate on its meaning. Hans Memling, she said, was born in the mid-1400s. He died in his late 20s. This particular picture was painted when he was in his mid-teens. A child, really, she said. It depicts a young man lost in a daydream, or so I thought before I read the title. Suddenly, we were right in front of it. It was called A Young Man at Prayer. I can't work it out, she said. I looked at the deep green background made lush and more verdant by the boy's pale face, his open and blatant expression as if no one, truly no one, could see him. I'll tell you how I see it, Claire then said softly. She was now standing right behind me. It's a performance, both the painting and what it depicts. I nodded without understanding what she meant. I began to see something else in the picture. I felt certain, too certain to have to say it, that what the boy was involved in was a reckoning with the possibility of prayer, that at that moment he was not praying so much as coming to terms with how he might, and to what end, which surely must be a sort of prayer in itself. So I loved visiting these locations. It was a great way of interacting with and immersing myself in the story. It all made it much more tangible, and I'd love to hear if you've ever visited any locations in a novel that you're reading. But I'd also love to hear if you have read this novel and what you think about it, because I think it's an incredible achievement, and this contemplation of what does someone do in their life when they can't return to the past and they can't build a future for themselves, when they're locked in this kind of limbo state in the present and not able to move on with their life. And it was so fascinating. After this, I went back and I read Matar's memoir, The Return, which is such a personal story about how his father disappeared under the Libyan government, and how he spent so many years trying to find out what happened to him and dealing with a lot of these people who could definitely be defined as unreasonable men, and the impact that this has had on his life and his family life, but also how it speaks to wider issues of living under oppressive systems and that prevent us from interacting honestly with each other and maintaining true connections. But I think what I love most about this book is that it has a quietly reflective quality to it of spending time with books and with artworks as a way of appreciating and understanding the world at a much deeper level, and as a method of escaping the noise and the terrors of the world. But thank you for watching me discuss this book. I hope many more people read it and love it as much as I did. I hope you're doing well, and I will speak to you again soon. Bye-bye.